What's up? How you doing? Here we are. Beautiful evening. Beautiful evening. It feels a little bit humid for me. I feel it a little bit. It's not bad, but it's there. So I'm dealing with it. So I was thinking, about the state of Maine. And anybody who knows me will tell you that that's one of my favorite states. Love that place. Spent a lot of time there when I was a kid, vacationing during the winter, fall. I love the fall in Maine. Beautiful. One thing that sticks out that I was gonna bring up, there's a place up there in Kittery, Maine. It's called Kittery Trading Post. I can't tell you, that was like my favorite. Well, I'm gonna tell you, but that was like my favorite place going up there as a kid. We always made a pit stop there on the way up, sometimes on the way down too. But I was a big slingshot guy. To this day I'm a big slingshot guy. Made some tea. Lipton. Oh, that's delicious. Delicious tea. So, big slingshot guy. Matter of fact, I own a bunch of them now. But back then, my father made me the first one. When I was 6 years old, my father made one out of wood. Nice hard wood. And he used a jigsaw. He cut it out, and then he filed the edges. Then he used sandpaper, made it nice and, smooth for my hand. And then we went to this, he had a friend who owned a tire shop. And he took the interior of a tube, or the interior of a tire, the tube, and my father cut out two rubber bands, and then we had this collection of old shoes. And my father cut the old shoe up and made the pocket for the rock. And then we went out and he showed me how to aim, and all that stuff. And from that day on, I was a huge fan. Like I said, I'm a huge fan today. Love the slingshot. If they put me on that show alone and they let me bring, slingshot, because that's unlimited supply of rocks, right? If they put me on that show, I'd be hunting down crows and eating them. I'd survive there like maybe a couple of years. They'd have to give me $1 million instead of the 500,000. So we pull into the parking lot, and the euphoria in my brain is off the charts. It was like the release of dopamine, crazy. So we would go in there, and of course, when I was a kid, I never hung around my parents in a store. I would take off and go my own direction. I'd explore the whole place. They had a big stuffed bear downstairs, So I'd go upstairs. They had all the good stuff, all the hunting stuff, camping stuff. And then after, making homemade slingshots, one day I'm looking over there and I see something called a wrist rocket by Daisy, I think. And I went to my father, said, "Can I get that?" And he looked at it, he goes, "Yeah, you can get that." And then I started shooting that. That became my next, slingshot thing. But since then I've advanced, and I've gotten better and better at it. And now I have really nice slingshots. But there was a welder in my neighborhood. My father was good friends with him. And he made, a friend of my father's who would also come with us up in Maine with his wife, he made him a slingshot made out of metal. He welded it, and then he wrapped it around with some kind of rubber and put the bands on. It was such a good slingshot. And so that friend of my father's would give me the slingshot when we would go to Maine, and I would go in there shooting trees up. So I miss Kittery Trading Post. I haven't been there in decades. I am pretty sure it's still there, but I haven't been there in decades. So when I would enter the door, man, I would get that rush. The same feeling I get now when I go to Bass Pro Shop. Bass Pro Shop, a bit bigger, but same stuff. I love stores like that. You know, I wish there were more Bass Pro Shops around. There's one in Vegas. So when I go to Las Vegas, sometimes if I'm in the mood, you know, like if we have time, depending on traffic and everything, I will make a pit stop there before I get on the highway to go back to LA. And that place is big. But I like to take my time. I don't want to be on a time schedule, you know, pressure. We gotta go, we gotta go. I want to go in there, and whenever I feel like leaving, that's when I'm going to leave. So, you know, when you're leaving from Vegas, you're always pressured. We got to get home, you know, school the next day or whatever. But now, I've never been hunting, not even one time, never. But I enjoy going in these places and checking out the hunting clothing, you know, and for different reasons for me. I picture myself getting a tent, which I have probably like 4 or 5 tents. I got 2, 3, 4 people tents. I never get the one. One is like a closet. So I go into that area, I look at the heavy-duty clothing for hunting, and I say, you know what, I'm going to get a tent, I'm going to get some of these jackets, nice hat, and I'm going to go and spend a snowstorm up in the mountains. I have yet to do that, but, you know, I mean, I have a family now, and they give you the guilt trip. Something's going to happen to you, and whatever, and I'm like, okay. But I'd like to go up there during a blizzard, be in my tent, but a nice tent, you know, maybe a 4-person tent, but it would just be me. I just need the extra room. Maybe have one of those portable stoves in there, cook some steak, baked potatoes, you know, things like that. Nice magazine, you know, you could read, I don't know, I like the survival magazines. You know, they show you like the end of the world is coming and you have all these options in there. So I like to read that, get your imagination to run around and get crazy on you. But yeah, I'm a huge fan. Kittery Trading Post. Maine is a very, very beautiful state. Very beautiful. I wish I had some land up there, you know, nice 50 acres, put a little house in the middle, and not to live there, but to, you know, vacation once in a while. Out of all the places, you know, there's a handful of places I think about, you know, maybe, you know, have a cottage there, whatever. Maine, though, is top of the list. Tea is really good, very delicious. Few stars are out. Makes me think of what the universe. Always have that on my mind, you know. Very, very weird. Sometimes, you know, I'm out and I'm looking at people and I'm thinking, what a strange reality we live in. Look at these things, human beings walking around, got dogs going around. We live on this planet. Nobody knows much of anything. I mean, we discover it as we go, but we're still in the infancy stages of discovering. And, you know, I'm fascinated. Here we are, lonely part of the galaxy, not much happening. And everything's a mystery until we somehow discover the answer. But everything is a mystery, you know. Originally, it was a mystery of what foods were safe to eat, and you'd look over at your neighbor eating something brand new, and he'd fall over and die, and you tell your kid, don't eat that, that's poison. They invented the word poison to tell people not to eat stuff that has poison in it. But, you know, we're still in the infancy stages. I mean, even our own bodies are a mystery to us, how they work, you know. I mean, okay, now we know a lot more. But imagine 100 years ago, they were clueless. They had no idea about a lot of things. And now, in 100 years, when they look back at us, they're going to say the same about us. But yeah, fascinating. And, we are the universe. We are the universe come to life. A lot of us, we think that we're outside of the universe, put here, and we're living in this weird... We are the universe come to life. Very fascinating thing, the reality in which we live in and how it exists itself, right? On a very starry night, I will look up in the sky and I get overwhelmed with the amount of stars, amount of solar systems out there. It's just crazy. And even the top scientists, they don't have an idea of what's going on. I mean, they know some things, but when they say, how big and how old the universe is, that's guessing. They don't really know. They don't know. They don't know because they don't know how big the universe actually is. If you knew for certain the universe was this big, then you could say, okay, it took this long to get here, so the universe is 13.8 billion years. But if the universe is trillions of times bigger than this, then you have no idea of knowing how old it is based on reverse engineering it. So we don't know what's going on. We know we exist. We know when we were born. We know our parents, but all the other stuff is folklore. We don't know. It's just we make it up as we go, and then we correct it as we learn more. Make some popcorn or something. I'm gonna move for popcorn later. Not now. Now I'm having my tea. Go to Disneyland every so often, and I always say, every day on average, 6 people, they break their shoelaces. They're tying, and boom, it gives 6 people. And Disneyland does not have one store that sells shoelaces. That's a big oversight. I would have like maybe a couple places that had shoelaces, just in case. Yeah, I could feel the humidity. It's not crazy, but I feel it because I'm not used to it now, and it's surrounding me. I was reading about Steven Tyler. One time somebody called him Steve Tyler, and he corrected them, which I respect that. People should call you what you want to be called. You want to be called Steven, they should call you Steven. You want to be called Steve, they should call you Steve. If you want to be called, Abubicus, they should call you that. But you get some people, they will say, Steven. A little too long for me. I'm going to go with Steve. And they start calling you Steve. That's not my name. Yeah, it's one letter, but that makes a difference to me, right? Some people want to be called John. Some people like Jonathan. Some people like Johnny. It's like Bill, Billy, John, Johnny, right? So that should be respected. If you want to be called a certain name, then that's the way you should be called. You shouldn't have people trying to influence the way your name should be. Those people are not looking after your best interests. That's not the way it goes. The way it goes is, you want to be called Chris, they call you Chris. You want to be called Christopher, they call you Christopher. You want to be called Christos, they call you that. Whatever you want. Me, I don't. My name is Nick. 99.99999% of people call me that. Every once in a while, somebody will say Nicholas. It's very rare. But I had a teacher in the 2nd grade. She used to call me, Nicholas, but not just Nicholas. She would say and then Nicholas, and then she'd call on me. And I used to hate that. I go, I'd go home angry. Second grade, I'm angry. I go, okay, tomorrow, if she says that again to me, I'm going to correct her. And tomorrow she would go, oh, I'm Nicholas. And, you're a little kid. You feel a little intimidated to correct her. But eventually I moved on, and no one has called me that since. Like I said, there's the rare exception where somebody, I will write down on a thing, a form, the full Nicholas, and then they'll say Nicholas. And a couple of times they said to me, you want to be called Nicholas or Nick? And at that point I clarify, I go, call me Nick. When I was a kid though, my whole neighborhood, they knew me as Nicky. I would hear from it, hey Nicky, and they'd wave, and I go, hey, but everybody in my neighborhood, they call me Nicky when I was little. Girls in my neighborhood, they'd say, hey Nicky, and I'd say, yeah, what's going on? And then after I became after the third grade, the Nicky thing went away and they started calling me Nick. But all my close friends, they always called me Nick. Always called me Nick. But I remember Nicky. Hey Nicky, hey, where's Nicky? I'm right here. And like I said, after third grade, it became what I want to be called, Nick. Now, if you call me something I don't like, I just don't respond to you, and you can get sore throat calling my name the way you want to call it. I will not respond to you. But, yeah. And then what was the other thing? Oh, Nicky Boy. I had a neighbor, old guy. He was old. He fought in World War II. He was a World War II veteran. And he called me Nicky Boy. Nicky Boy. If I'd hear him, hey, Nicky Boy. And I'd say, what am I, John Boy from the Waltons? Call me Nicky Boy. But yeah, he called me that until I was old. He'd say, hey, Nicky Boy. When he first moved into my neighborhood, I went and found him. I said, there's a new guy in my neighborhood. I'm going to go talk to him. So I sat him down at the stairs and I started talking to him. And about a year before he moved in, we had a, this is like a, what do you call it? Like a Michael Myers thing, There was a little splashing going on there. There was a mental hospital. That's what they called them back then, mental health hospital, and it was about, 2.5 miles from my house. So one night, it was a Saturday night, I remember, we had cars parked in the driveway, and some guy escaped from the mental hospital. And where does he come? Comes to my house, my neighborhood, right? And he climbs up on the cars and he's trying to look in the windows of the house. I had a neighbor in those days. He was like a watchdog. He noticed, calls up my father, and my father immediately gets outside and tries to find the guy. The guy is gone, but you heard the door opening and he took off. Cops come. My neighbor called the cops, and they said to my father, what are you doing? You're going out there, you don't know, this guy might have a knife, a gun, whatever. And my father said, I don't care. So they did a few circles around the neighborhood and they got him. They got the guy. He was on the back side. He jumped over the fence of our yard. He went to the back road, and you stick out like a sore thumb when it's like 11 o'clock at night and the streets are quiet and you're the only one walking and you look crazy. So they got him, and they came back and they said to my father, we got him. He's the guy that escaped from the mental hospital. So the next morning, Sunday, I went downstairs and I looked. My mother had an area around the yard, where she would plant tomatoes during the summertime. And I guess before he climbed up on top of the cars, LAPD. Very noisy. So I guess before he climbed on top of the cars, he walked around our yard on the dirt area, and when I looked out, I saw pointy shoes everywhere. He had these pointy shoes. And I said, I'm glad they got that guy. So that was like, what was I, like second grade when that happened. So I told him that story. He was new to the neighborhood. I told him that story and he freaked out. I didn't know older people get scared, you know. So come to find out, I scared him. You know, he got scared. He was thinking of leaving the neighborhood and going somewhere else because of that story. So my father found out that, you know, I scared him, and he said to me, go tell him you made it up. Which was kind of hard for me to do because, you know, it's like I'm creating a scenario now where he's going to think I'm lying, right? So anyway, I had to go and tell him I made it up because he was like really nervous. Like, what kind of neighborhood is this? Crazy people are coming to your driveway. So I go, you know that story I told you the other day? I made it up. So he goes, oh, you son of a gun, you had me going. And I'm like, yeah. So for the rest of my life, right, every time he would think of that, he would say, remember when you were a kid, Nicky boy, and you told me that story about that crazy man? He goes, oh, you had me going. I fell for that. And he'd laugh. And I kept it going. I was like, yeah, I remember when I told you that. So then, probably when, I don't know, what was it, like 25 years had passed. So I knew him really well. 25 years had passed. I'm like, no big deal if I tell him now, right? So one day it was raining and I was with my father and my mother was sitting downstairs underneath the porch. And we're just sitting there on the deck and he's out there, and I said, you know what, I'm going to tell him. I'm going to tell him that that story was true. So I said, you remember that story? He goes, yeah, I remember you told me that. And I go, that was a true story. And the only reason I told you it wasn't true is because you got so scared that my father thought, you know, the best thing to do to calm you down was to tell you it was made up. And then my father jumps in. He's like, yeah, he goes, that's a true story. He goes, that really happened. The guy came to the window and I came out and the cops came and it was a guy from the hospital. He escaped. And my neighbor goes, he goes, I'll be a son of a gun. He goes, that was true? I go, yeah, it was. So he finally found out the truth, that that really did happen. So then that happened. I was like second grade. Fast forward, I'm in high school now, right? I'm like, I don't know, like a sophomore. My father's upstairs watching television. We get a call, my neighbor, same guy. My neighbor was like the watchdog of the neighborhood. Calls up, he says to my father, there's a guy in my yard roaming around. Can you come down and I'll meet you and we'll check it out, see what's going on? My father goes, yeah. My father was ready to go when it came to stuff like that. So he goes downstairs, he grabs two, somebody calling me. I will take that in a minute. So anyway, my father goes down in the basement, he grabs two trash can lids, opens up the door nice and slow. Nobody heard anything. Goes around, goes up the yard, my neighbor's house, and my neighbor in the back had these big bushes. They were like 8 feet tall, really bushy. The guy went in there and he was hiding. And my neighbor told my father, he's like, he's in there, you know. So my father took those two things and dove in there and got the guy. Grabbed him out, you know, he had him in his hands, he's pulling him out and he's walking on the lawn with the guy. And the cops come and they pull their guns out on my father. And my neighbor says, not him. He goes, him, the other guy. The other guy is the guy, the intruder. That's my neighbor. So they took that guy away. I don't know where that guy, you know, what the story was with that guy. But then the cops talked to my father. They said to him, what you did, very dangerous. You know, you don't know. The guy could have a gun. You don't know. You go in the bushes with the trash can things. So they said to him, this is the advice that the cops gave my father. They said the next time that happens, don't do anything out here. You know, you get in trouble. The guy will say, you know, I wasn't doing anything, you know, no self-defense, whatever. He goes, grab him, pull him into your basement, have your wife come down, tear your wife's shirt, and say that he attacked your wife. And then he goes, do whatever you want to him. This is a long time ago. My father, you know, was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to, you know, do all that with the acting, but that's what they told him. that never happened again, so we didn't get the opportunity, but we always remember that story. So yeah, memories of the old days. I had a good neighborhood, you know. We had a lot of neighbors. We all knew each other, you know. A lot of kids back then in my neighborhood, all my age, you know, a couple years older, a couple years younger, some exactly my age. And it was a fun time. I had a fun time. I had a really good childhood, you know, no crazy stories. Played a lot of friends. You know, I had a handful of really close friends, but then I had the outer circle that were many more kids, not as close, but close enough. And we all played in the neighborhood, you know, from stickball to hide and seek, or hide and go seek, to just exploring backyards of people that didn't want us there. So really fun time back then. And they all knew me, you know, every neighbor, they knew that's Nicky. So I remember I was going to mention this lady in another video, but I remember there was this old lady, had to be in her late 80s, and very skinny, very short hair, kind of, you know, fluffy. And you'd always see her walking in my neighborhood, you know, had a bag of groceries, always walking somewhere. And my mother would always say, oh, there she is again. So one day I was on my bike, had an Apollo Ross 5-speed, or Ross Apollo 5-speed. And I saw her, and I kind of went up to her, and I started talking to her. And she basically had a conversation with me about how walking is very important to her, how she thinks it'll, you know, make her live a long time. I go, you've already lived a long time. What are you? You're like 90 right now. And she said that her father taught her this whole thing about the walking. And so I said, you know, and then I saw her for, you know, 2-3 more years after that. And I guess she died after that, because never saw her again. But I always remembered her. She always had a blue, like a long coat in the wintertime. And she would walk really slow. She was probably like 85 pounds. And I don't know the name of this person. I don't know, you know, where she lived, but I know she lived somewhere in our neighborhood. And my mother was always fascinated with her. She's like, oh, there she is walking again. Very nice lady. One time she chatted with me for like an hour, telling me her story. But like I said, I never asked details like who's your, you know, not who's your, but what's your last name, none of that. You know, gave her privacy. I don't know whatever happened to her, but anyway, I'm gonna see what that call was about, and that's it for now. Ciao.